Ladies and gentlemen, life is suffering. That's the first fundamental truth you must accept. And yet within that suffering, there exists an opportunity for profound transformation. You found yourself entangled with a narcissist, someone who sought to control, manipulate, and diminish you, and yet here you stand, not broken, not defeated, but victorious. Now, you might ask, why did I have to endure that? That's the wrong question. The better question is, what did I learn from it? God, or if you prefer, the fundamental structure of being itself, placed you in that situation not to destroy you, but to forge you, to force you to become more than you were. You see, narcissists operate in a predictable manner. They exploit, they deceive, they extract value from others without reciprocating it. But here's what most people fail to realize. Narcissists are also teachers. They teach you what manipulation looks like. They teach you the cost of ignoring red flags. They teach you painfully, brutally, that you must establish boundaries, stand up for yourself, and refuse to be subjugated by the selfish ambitions of others. And once you learn these lessons, truly learn them, you become immune, you become stronger. Life is a relentless test of resilience, and suffering is not just an inevitable part of existence. It is a necessary one. The trials we face are not random acts of cruelty. They are the very crucibles that refine and define us. When you found yourself entangled with a narcissist, it may have felt like a cruel twist of fate, an unfair and unearned punishment. But that's not the right way to see it. The truth is that such encounters, as painful as they are, serve a higher purpose. You were placed in that situation not to be destroyed, but to be transformed. You were not just suffering for the sake of suffering. You were being shaped, much like metal in a forge, exposed to extreme heat so that you could emerge stronger, sharper, and more refined. Pain is a demanding teacher. It does not coddle, it does not comfort, and it does not concern itself with fairness. And yet, it is the most effective tool for transformation. The narcissist in your life was an agent of this process, whether they intended to be or not. They tested your limits. They pushed against your boundaries. And in doing so, they exposed your weaknesses. They showed you where you were too trusting, too passive, too willing to ignore your own needs for the sake of someone else's validation. It may have taken time for you to see it, but what they did was reveal the very aspects of yourself that required strengthening. At first, the experience of being entangled with a narcissist feels like an all-consuming loss. You lose your sense of security, your confidence, and perhaps even your trust in others. It is an erosion of the self, a slow and agonizing dismantling of the identity you once carried. But here's the paradox. The self that is dismantled is often the weak self, the self that was built on unstable foundations. And what rises from the ashes of that destruction is something far more resilient. Imagine a tree that has been battered by storms year after year. The winds tear through its branches, the rain erodes the soil at its roots, and still it stands. But the tree does not remain unchanged. It adapts. It grows deeper roots. It learns to sway with the wind rather than snap under its force. The same principle applies to you. Your encounter with a narcissist forced you to develop a deeper, unshakable core. You learned to establish boundaries. You learned to say no. You learned, perhaps for the first time, that your worth is not dictated by someone else's opinion of you. It is in the depths of hardship that we discover who we truly are. The version of you that walked into that relationship was not the same version that walked out of it. And that is the entire point. Had you never faced this trial, had you never been forced to confront the darker aspects of human nature, you might have continued on as a weaker, less defined version of yourself. But now you see with greater clarity. You recognize manipulation when it presents itself. You sense toxicity before it has the chance to infiltrate your life. You have been burned, yes, but now you are fireproof. None of this means that the suffering was justified or deserved. The cruelty of a narcissist is not excusable simply because it serves a purpose. But you are responsible for what you do with that suffering. You can choose to let it embitter you, to allow it to make you cynical and distrusting of the world, or you can choose to let it strengthen you. The most powerful people in history, the ones who changed the world, who left legacies that span generations, are the ones who faced suffering and chose to emerge from it wiser rather than broken. There is a concept in psychology known as post-traumatic growth. The idea that suffering does not just break people, but can also be the catalyst for extraordinary growth. Many people who endure profound hardships, whether it be loss, betrayal, or even abuse, do not simply return to who they were before. Instead, they become something greater. They develop deeper empathy, stronger resilience, and a more profound sense of purpose. And that is the opportunity you have now. You may not have chosen the suffering you endured, but you get to choose what it makes of you. You can choose to remain stuck in the pain, to let it define you as a victim, or you can recognize it for what it was, a transformation process. One that was brutal, yes, but also necessary, because now you are not the same person who walked into that fire. You are the person who walked out of it. And that makes all the difference. The presence of a narcissist in your life was not just an unfortunate accident. It was not merely an unlucky twist of fate that placed you in their path. Rather, their role in your journey was far more profound than you might have initially realized. Narcissists do not enter our lives randomly. They often find their way to people who have something to learn, something to strengthen, something to reclaim. They are drawn to individuals with open hearts, with a deep capacity for empathy, with a willingness to give. And while these are admirable traits, they can also be vulnerabilities if left unchecked. A narcissist exposes the gaps in your self-understanding, the weaknesses in your boundaries, and the blind spots in your perception of yourself and others. They force you to confront aspects of yourself that you may have been unwilling or unable to see. Maybe you were too forgiving, too eager to see the good in others, too willing to sacrifice your needs for the sake of harmony. Maybe you had been conditioned to believe that love means enduring pain, that self-worth is something to be earned through service to another, or that setting boundaries makes you selfish. These are deep-rooted beliefs that can go unchallenged for years until someone comes along and exploits them. A narcissist serves as a mirror, reflecting back to you the places where you lack self-respect, where you compromise too much, where you allow mistreatment because you fear conflict or reject. They do this not because they want to help you grow. On the contrary, their aim is to dominate and control, but their very dysfunction becomes a source of revelation. You cannot remain blind to your own patterns when you are in a relationship with someone who manipulates, belittles, and drains you. Eventually, you are forced to wake up. You are forced to ask yourself, why am I allowing this? Why do I stay? Why do I excuse behavior that I would never tolerate if it were happening to someone else? These questions are painful, but they are necessary. They strip away illusions and demand honest self-reflection. That is the true gift hidden within the narcissist's presence in your life. They compel you to see yourself clearly. They push you to recognize the ways in which you have abandoned your own well-being in pursuit of love, validation, or acceptance. They force you to confront uncomfortable truths about your past, perhaps wounds that were left unhealed, patterns that were unconsciously repeated, or fears that kept you from asserting yourself. Without the narcissist, you might never have recognized these aspects of yourself. You might have continued living with unresolved insecurities, allowing them to dictate your relationships and decisions. But now you see, now you know. This realization is not an easy one. It comes with grief, with anger, with a sense of betrayal, not just by the narcissist, but by yourself. You may look back and wonder how you allowed it to happen, why you didn't leave sooner, why you ignored the warning signs. But self-blame is not the answer. Instead, you must recognize that you did what you could with the awareness you had at the time. Growth is not instantaneous. It is a process, one that often requires pain as a catalyst. You were not weak for being deceived or manipulated. You were simply unprepared. And now you are no longer unprepared. Now you understand. This understanding is what leads to true victory. It is not enough to escape the narcissist. You must also learn from the experience. Otherwise, the lesson will present itself again and again in different forms with different people until you finally acknowledge what needs to be changed. The universe, or perhaps your own subconscious, will continue drawing you toward situations that force you to address these unresolved aspects of yourself. But once you learn the lesson, truly learn it, you break the cycle. You no longer attract the same type of person because you no longer tolerate what you once did. You no longer fall into the same traps because you see them for what they are. In this way, the narcissist serves a paradoxical function. They seek to break you, but in doing so, they create the conditions for your strength. They seek to make you doubt yourself, but in the end, they force you to develop unshakable self-trust. They seek to make you dependent on them, but in doing so, they push you toward radical independence. They are not your teacher in the traditional sense. They are not wise, nor do they act with noble intentions, but their presence teaches you what no gentle mentor ever could. They teach you through fire, through struggle, through the raw and unfiltered experience of suffering. And suffering, when met with the right mindset, does not weaken, it fortifies. Now, you stand on the other side of that ordeal. You have faced the darkness, and you have come out of it changed. You see yourself differently. You understand your worth in a way that you never did before. You recognize the necessity of boundaries, of self-respect, of walking away from anything that does not serve your growth. And because of this, you are not the same person who first encountered the narcissist. That version of you, the one who tolerated, who excused, who endured, is gone. What remains is someone wiser, someone stronger, someone who knows their value and refuses to let it be diminished ever again. The narcissist may have believed they were in control, that they had power over you, but the real power was always yours. The moment you saw through the illusion, the moment you decided to reclaim yourself, the moment you refused to play their game, that was the moment you won. And that victory, the victory of self-awareness, of growth, of transformation, is one that can never be taken from you. Blaming the narcissist for everything that went wrong in your life is an easy response, but it is not a productive one. Yes, they manipulated you. Yes, they deceived you. Yes, they drained your energy, belittled your worth, and left you questioning your reality. That much is true. But what is also true is that your response to their behavior was always within your control, even if you did not realize it at the time. This is where the concept of responsibility comes in, and it is one of the most difficult yet necessary truths to accept. Responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for the narcissist's actions. It does not mean excusing their cruelty or pretending that what they did was acceptable. Instead, responsibility means acknowledging your own role in how you responded to the situation. Did you ignore red flags? Did you stay silent when you should have spoken up? Did you tolerate mistreatment out of fear of abandonment or conflict? Did you sacrifice your own well-being in an attempt to appease them? These are hard questions to ask, but they are the questions that lead to true growth. Most people, when faced with suffering, look outward for an explanation. They search for a villain, a source of injustice that they can point to and say, "This is why I am in pain." And while it is true that external forces can cause suffering, the way a person responds to suffering determines whether they remain trapped in it or rise above it. The moment you shift your focus from blaming the narcissist to asking yourself what you could have done differently, you reclaim your power. Because if you acknowledge that you played a role, even if it was an unconscious one, then you also acknowledge that you have the ability to change. If you do not take responsibility for your part in the dynamic, then you remain a victim. And if you remain a victim, you remain powerless. But when you recognize that you had a choice, even if it was just the choice to walk away, you begin to realize that you are not helpless. You were never helpless. You may have been unaware, unprepared, or too emotionally invested to see the truth, but that does not mean you lack the ability to change your circumstances. It only means that you needed to develop the awareness and the courage to do so. This is not an easy realization to accept because it requires looking at yourself with brutal honesty. It requires admitting that you allowed certain behaviors to continue longer than they should have. It requires acknowledging that at some level you prioritized maintaining the relationship over protecting your own self-respect. And most of all, it requires facing the possibility that the pain you endured was in part a result of your own choices. That is a difficult truth, but it is also the truth that will set you free. There is a psychological principle that states that we attract what we believe we deserve. If you found yourself entangled with a narcissist, it is worth asking yourself what subconscious beliefs led you to accept their treatment of you. Did you believe that love required suffering? Did you believe that your worth was tied to someone else's approval? Did you believe that setting boundaries made you selfish? These beliefs do not appear out of nowhere. They are often formed in childhood, shaped by early experiences and reinforced over time. And if they remain unchallenged, they continue to dictate the choices we make, often without us even realizing it. But here is where responsibility becomes a tool for transformation. Once you recognize these beliefs, you have the power to change them. Once you become aware of how your past conditioning shaped your responses, you can begin to rewrite the script. You can decide consciously that you no longer accept mistreatment. You can decide that your worth is not something to be negotiated. You can decide that your voice matters, that your boundaries matter, and that your well-being is not something to be sacrificed for someone else's ego. Taking responsibility does not mean that what happened to you was fair. It does not mean that the narcissist was justified in their actions. But it does mean that you refuse to let their behavior define your future. It means that you take what you have learned and use it to ensure that you never find yourself in the same situation again. It means that you do not wait for an apology that will never come, nor do you waste time hoping that they will change. Instead, you focus on what you can control, your own growth, your own healing, and your own ability to create a life that is no longer dictated by the wounds of the past. Most people never reach this point. They remain stuck in cycles of blame, bitterness, and resentment. They replay the past over and over again, searching for ways they could have convinced the narcissist to change, searching for closure that will never arrive. But closure does not come from the narcissist. It comes from within. It comes when you decide that the pain ends with you. It comes when you take responsibility, not for what happened to you, but for how you move forward. In many ways, responsibility is the ultimate form of empowerment. It is the realization that you are not merely at the mercy of life's circumstances, that you are not destined to repeat the same mistakes, and that your past does not have to dictate your future. The narcissist may have played a role in your story, but they do not get to write the ending. That is up to you. And so the question becomes, what will you do with what you have learned? Will you remain bitter, allowing the narcissist to occupy space in your mind long after they are gone? Or will you take what they have taught you, however painful the lesson, and use it to become the strongest version of yourself? Will you continue to make excuses for why your life is not what you want it to be? Or will you take ownership of your choices and build something better? These are not easy choices, but they are the choices that separate those who remain stuck in the past from those who rise above it. You have already proven that you are capable of surviving the storm. Now the challenge is to ensure that you do not merely survive, but that you thrive. And that begins with the decision to take responsibility for what comes next. Because the moment you do that, the moment you take full ownership of your life, you are no longer a victim. You are victorious. Pain is one of life's most relentless teachers, and suffering is often the catalyst for growth. When you have been through the depths of manipulation, deceit, and emotional turmoil at the hands of a narcissist, it can feel like you have been left shattered, depleted, and utterly broken. But what if this suffering was not merely an unfortunate chapter in your life? What if it was, instead, an invitation, an opportunity to discover something profound about yourself? Something that could not have been revealed in any other way. Growth does not happen in comfort. Strength is not developed in ease. You do not forge resilience in a world without adversity. The suffering you endured was the very process that revealed your inner strength, not because it was fair, not because it was just, but because you rose from it. A narcissist's goal is to dominate, control, and erode your sense of self. They do this through manipulation, gaslighting, and by distorting reality so that you begin to question your own worth. Over time, they create a version of you that is dependent on their approval, uncertain of your own instincts, and hesitant to assert your needs. And yet, despite their efforts, you are here. You emerged from that relationship. You saw the truth. You recognized the toxicity for what it was. That in itself is a testament to your strength. Not everyone reaches that point. Some remain trapped for years, unable to break free from the cycle. But you did. That means that deep inside you, beneath all the doubt, beneath all the conditioning that told you to tolerate mistreatment, there was always something stronger, something unbreakable. The experience of being in a relationship with a narcissist forces you to develop a kind of inner fortitude that few other experiences can. It teaches you how to navigate deception, how to stand firm in your own reality, and how to trust yourself even when someone else is trying to convince you that you are wrong. At first, this process is agonizing. It feels like you are losing yourself, like the very foundation of your identity is crumbling beneath you. But what is actually happening is far more profound. You are shedding the parts of yourself that were never truly strong to begin with. You are letting go of the version of you that was willing to tolerate disrespect, that sought validation from the wrong sources, that ignored red flags in the name of love or loyalty. Pain, when met with the right mindset, does not merely break, it rebuilds. It forces you to look at yourself in ways you never would have otherwise. It forces you to ask difficult questions. Why did I allow this? What in me was drawn to this dynamic? What did I need to learn? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that lead to transformation. The strength you gain from answering them is not superficial, it is foundational. It is the kind of strength that prevents you from ever falling into the same patterns again. It is the kind of strength that allows you to recognize manipulation before it takes hold, to set boundaries without guilt, to walk away without second-guessing yourself. The truth is, life does not spare anyone from suffering. Everyone at some point will be tested, will be broken down by circumstances beyond their control. But not everyone chooses to use that suffering as fuel for growth. Many people remain bitter. They carry the weight of their past like chains, unable to move forward. They let the pain define them rather than reshape them. The difference between those who rise and those who remain trapped is not the amount of suffering they experience, it is what they choose to do with it. And this is where your true power lies. You have a choice. You can view your experience with the narcissist as an unfortunate event that left you wounded, or you can view it as the experience that revealed just how strong you truly are. You can allow it to make you fearful of love, distrustful of others, closed off to connection, or you can allow it to sharpen your intuition, to teach you discernment, to help you recognize the difference between real love and manipulation. The pain you endured gave you knowledge that many people do not have. You now understand human nature in a way that few do. You recognize deception when you see it. You know what it feels like to be controlled, and you know what it takes to break free. That knowledge is a form of power. But power is meaningless if it is not used. This is why the next step in your journey is so critical. You must take everything you have learned about yourself, about others, about the world, and use it to build something stronger. You must take the wisdom that was forged in suffering and apply it to your future. That means refusing to lower your standards for anyone. It means being unapologetic about your boundaries. It means valuing yourself not based on how others treat you, but on how you treat yourself. Strength is not just about endurance. It is not just about surviving pain. True strength is about transformation. It is about taking something that was meant to destroy you and using it as the foundation for something indestructible. And that is exactly what you have the opportunity to do now. This journey is not over. Healing is not a linear process, nor is growth something that happens all at once. But every step you take toward reclaiming yourself, every moment you choose self-respect over self-sacrifice, every time you trust yourself instead of seeking validation, you are proving something profound, that the narcissist did not win. They may have tried to break you, but all they did was reveal the strength that was inside you all along. And that strength, it is yours to keep. Healing after enduring a relationship with a narcissist is not just about moving on. It is about becoming a version of yourself that is no longer vulnerable to the same kind of manipulation. It is about ensuring that you never again fall into a dynamic where your worth is questioned, your boundaries are ignored, or your reality is distorted. The experience may have broken you temporarily, but what truly matters is how you rebuild yourself. The only real justice in the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship is becoming the person they never wanted you to be. Strong, self-assured, independent, and untouchable. A narcissist thrives on control. They seek to keep you dependent on them, uncertain of yourself and afraid to leave. Their power lies in their ability to manipulate your perception of yourself, of them, of the relationship. They make you feel as though you need them, as though their validation is the only thing that gives you worth. But now that you are free, you have the opportunity to reclaim your power in the most meaningful way possible, by no longer needing their approval, their recognition, or even their presence to feel complete. True healing does not happen when the narcissist apologizes, because they rarely do, does not happen when they acknowledge the pain they caused, because they likely never will. It happens when you no longer care whether they do or not. It happens when their opinion of you becomes irrelevant, when their absence feels like a blessing instead of a loss, when you realize that you do not need closure from them because you have given it to yourself. That is real freedom. That is real power. This does not mean that the scars disappear overnight. Healing is a process, and it requires deep self-examination. You must unlearn the conditioning that made you susceptible to manipulation in the first place. You must rebuild your self-esteem, not based on external validation, but on an internal sense of worth. You must learn to trust yourself again, to trust your intuition, your judgment, your ability to recognize red flags. The narcissist may have planted seeds of doubt in your mind, making you question whether you were too sensitive, too demanding, too difficult. But healing means realizing that you were never the problem. The problem was that you allowed someone else to dictate your worth, and now you no longer do. One of the most crucial steps in this journey is setting boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. A boundary is not just about saying no to toxic people. It is about saying no to your old patterns, your old fears, your old tendency to put others before yourself at your own expense. It means recognizing when you are slipping back into people-pleasing, when you are excusing behavior that does not align with your values, when you are ignoring your own needs out of fear of conflict or rejection. Healing means catching yourself in those moments and making a different choice. The narcissist wanted to see you broken. They wanted you to believe that you could not function without them, that you would never find happiness outside of their presence. But the greatest revenge is proving them wrong, not through anger or bitterness, but through thriving. When you build a life that is rich, fulfilling, and completely detached from them, you strip them of their power. You become someone they can no longer touch, no longer manipulate, no longer affect in any meaningful way. And that is what they fear the most, your complete and total indifference. There will be moments when the past resurfaces. You may feel anger, resentment, or sadness. You may find yourself replaying conversations, wondering how things might have been different. But every time you catch yourself doing that, remind yourself that the narcissist is no longer in control. You are. They may have been part of your story, but they do not get to write the ending. That is yours to create. Healing also means rediscovering joy. For so long, your energy was consumed by trying to manage the chaos, trying to keep the peace, trying to meet impossible expectations. But now you get to focus on yourself. not in a selfish way, but in a way that honors your own needs, your own passions, your own growth. You get to explore who you are outside of the trauma, outside of the survival mode that the narcissist kept you trapped in. You get to live without fear, without guilt, without constantly walking on eggshells. One day you will wake up and realize that you no longer think about them. You no longer wonder what they are doing, whether they miss you, whether they regret losing you. You will realize that they are simply a past chapter in a much larger story, one that no longer defines you. And that will be the moment you know you have truly won. Because the goal was never just to escape the narcissist. The goal was to become so whole, so self-assured, so full of life that they become completely irrelevant. That is your victory. That is your power. And that is the life you are meant to live. You were placed in the narcissist's life for a reason, not to be broken, not to be diminished, but to discover the depth of your own strength. You endured manipulation, deceit, and emotional turmoil, yet here you stand, not as a victim, but as a survivor, stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than ever before. The pain you experienced was not meaningless. It was a test, a lesson, a transformation. It forced you to confront your deepest wounds, to question your own patterns, and ultimately to rise above them. The narcissist did everything in their power to control you, to make you doubt yourself, to keep you trapped in their cycle of chaos, but they failed. Because in the end, you chose yourself. You chose to see the truth. You chose to walk away. You chose to heal. And in doing so, you reclaimed your power in the most profound way possible, not through revenge, not through bitterness, but through growth. Now, the choice is yours. You can carry this experience as a weight, allowing it to define you, or you can use it as fuel to build the life you deserve. You can remain bitter, or you can become better. You can let the narcissist's voice linger in your mind, or you can replace it with your own, one that is strong, confident, and unapologetically free. This journey is not just about escaping toxicity. It is about ensuring that you never return to it. It is about becoming someone who is no longer susceptible to manipulation, someone who no longer tolerates disrespect, someone who no longer seeks validation from those who refuse to give it. It is about stepping into the fullness of who you are, without fear, without hesitation, without apology. The narcissist may have played a role in your story, but they do not get to write the ending. That is yours to create. And you, having come out victorious, will write a story of strength, self-respect, and undeniable triumph. Because in the end, the greatest victory is not just surviving, it is thriving